Right, Friday, here we are. It's just me today, unless someone else pops in. I've sent the invite out, but it could just be a one-man show, and that's perfectly okay because we've got a lot to talk about. We have transfer portal news. We've got to talk about some SEC transfer portal news. We need to talk about some Big 12 transfer portal news. I have got to talk about the Oklahoma Sooners getting some big time wins, and finally, Urban Meyer says something that we have got to unpack. Y'all know where we got to begin. Transfer portal news. And there's a few different ways we could shake this out. When we look at the transfer portal right now, I think one of the biggest things is the quarterbacks in the transfer portal. And today, a big move happened in that department as Peyton Thorne commits to Auburn. So, whenever I saw this, my first reaction was, did they immediately get better at quarterback? And I'm not 100% certain. Look, I'm going to be very honest with you here. Robbie Ashford is a guy that's been in the system for Auburn, has some familiarity with some of the pieces there, wasn't tabbed as the full time starter last year. But my biggest question is this: with Hugh Freeze, we know what he does with the quarterback position. He's been great offensively. There is no question there. My biggest question is, does Robbie Ashford's mobility give him a leg up in this battle? And I think that answer is yes. Now, I'm not saying discount Peyton Thorne. The one thing we got to understand, Peyton Thorne has college football experience. He's coming off of a year where he saw good experience passing for over 60% in back to back years. That being said, when we look at the numbers for Peyton Thorne, there's a lot left to be desired. He's coming off of a year with 19 touchdowns to 11 interceptions, didn't have the most passing yards, which I'm not saying you have to. Different offenses require different things. And that's really where we need to talk about. The Michigan State offense was not great. It just wasn't. And one of the things you heard when we saw this exodus from Michigan State the other day is, well, maybe some of these quarterbacks and these wide receivers, they're trying to get away from each other. Well, now we hear that Keon Coleman is interested in visiting Auburn. He played with Peyton Thorne. So I'm interested to see if a change of new scenery is what the doctor ordered for Peyton Thorne for a Keon Coleman who hasn't committed anywhere. I think he's taking a visit to Auburn. Speaking of another wide receiver in Auburn, Lamonius Craig, who transferred from Colorado, had that massive spring game. I think there's some predictions going in his favor for the Auburn Tigers. Auburn needs some help offensively, but one thing we need to understand, Hugh Freeze is a great offensive mind. I'm very interested to see what Auburn does this season. I think they're a team that we're going to be having a lot of conversations about, and they're a team that the transfer portal can absolutely help. But now let's kind of move forward. We've got Mars on the chat, Rogue, Boomer, Sooner from Chicken. Let's talk about y'all's Sooners, right? Because we got some OU portal wins, and we'll keep ping ponging back to the transfer portal. But let's get to some of these Oklahoma transfer portal wins. And where do we want to begin here? Because I don't think the Oklahoma Sooners are done in the portal. I don't. I think there's a few more guys they could look to bring in. I think that wide receiver room, it's one of the areas we're about to talk about. We're going to talk about some questions I have for the Oklahoma Sooners moving into the 2023 season. The wide receiver room is one of them. I think that's an area keep your eye out on. Let's talk defense, because whenever we're talking about what Oklahoma has got to do differently in 2023, I think a large conversation will revolve around the defense. Now, in fairness, Brent Venables didn't have a loaded cupboard when he got to the Oklahoma Sooners, right? We understand this. It wasn't a situation where he got a Ferrari ready to go. He's had to do some tuning on this Ferrari. It's getting there, but I still am interested to see at what point the Ferrari will be when the season gets here, which I think is a perfectly legitimate question. Brent Venables is only at his second year as a head coach. He's done phenomenal work on the recruiting trail, both in terms of traditional recruiting and transfer portal recruiting. He has been great at this new era of college football, balancing them and retaining a really solid roster for the Sooners. We haven't seen that exodus from key players during the Brent Venables tenure. But that defense is still a question mark as a whole, just because there is so much new. There's so much new in terms of system, players. It's just going to be a learning process. That being said, I've said it time and time again, I would bet that Sooners defense is better. So let's start with Near, right? Mike says, I think Near looks promising. He has a good nose for the ball and looks as if he has good sideline to sideline speed. I just need to see how he plays in a D1 setting against better competitive teams. Mike, I think that's a completely reasonable take. I talked about this actually in the video earlier today. Look, there's two different conversations we can have whenever we're talking about Connor Near, and both can be true. One, that there is a difference between Division Two football and Division One football. That much is true. I think we can all acknowledge that. There's a difference between the levels of Division One, right? Whether we're talking Power Five, non-Power Five. But it can also be simultaneously true that guy's a football player. We can turn on the film and say, hey, I like this, I like this, I like this. We can talk about players that were a 0-star recruit, 2-star, 1-star, 3-star recruit out of high school, ended it up developing later on, really coming on later on. That's perfectly natural. And I do completely agree with you. Whenever we turn on the film for Near, there's a lot to like. You talk about the sideline speed, Mike, and I don't disagree with that. I love the violence at the point of attack. Now, I've talked about this time and time again. I'm a defensive guy. If you're asking me, Ty, you can either watch all 22 film of offensive football or defensive football. What do you pick? It's going to be hard for me not to pick defensive football unless you're giving me some really fun offensive minds to watch. Then we'll have a conversation. But 9 times out of 10, I'm going to take the defensive side of the ball. So when I see that ferocity, that aggression at the point of attack, I love that, especially at the linebacker position. And the other thing we need to acknowledge whenever we're talking about the Oklahoma Sooners linebacker position is that they don't have a lot of experience. Danny Stutzman is there. I think he's going to be in for a really good year. I think he's going to take a step up, understand the system better. We saw the progression through the year, but outside of Stutzman, you don't have somebody that just has that bona fide starting experience. Kanak got some snaps later on to the year. I really like what Kip Lewis showed during the spring game. I've talked about that. Kobe McKenzie, another name. Shane Whittier, another name. But you don't have that bona fide starting experience. So I think whenever you can go in the transfer portal and get a guy, even if you don't know if he's going to come in day one and start, he's got experience. I think that's intriguing. And that's where I really thought that addition was interesting. Let's go to some comments real quick. Rogue saying apparently they are looking at Keon too. Rogue, please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm assuming your comment is in reference to the Oklahoma Sooners are looking at Keon too. And absolutely, look, really talented wide receiver. There's a wide receiver that we'll talk about here in a little bit that I think is just as intriguing. We'll get to that here in a little bit, Rogue. Be sure to remind me if I start going off on a tangent. I have been known to do that from time to time. We are what we are. Our record is 6-7 till we develop and prove it. Yeah, it's completely fair, Chicken. And I've told you, look, I think y'all are going in the right direction. I think that whenever you look, one of the biggest litmus tests for college football teams, what are the players feeling? What are the recruits feeling? And if they're excited, I'm not saying you're going to see immediate results, but there's probably a reason those guys are excited. It's one of the reasons why I've been high on Colorado. Yeah, there's a total overhaul going on there, but you listen to some of the guys around that program, they're excited. You have certain programs where that happens. And Chicken, I think that's indicative of moving in the right direction. There's another team we're going to talk about that has that same feel. We're going to talk about it later on. Anthony, how you doing this evening? Glad you could make it in. Chicken, I don't know if I know this one. Retype this one in and we'll get to that. Sport Geek says, I told you Ty Simpson wasn't him. Look, we don't know who he is, Sport. In fairness, if I'm not mistaken, he broke his thumb or dislocated it in that spring game within like the first few drives. And the Alabama quarterback situation is an interesting one because I've said this. I was taken aback that they took Tyler Buckner out of the transfer portal. Personally, when I look at the Alabama quarterback situation, you have Jalen Milroe, who is very talented. You have Ty Simpson, who's got ability. And then you bring in Tyler Buckner. And the reason I was so perplexed is because all three of those quarterbacks to me share a common trait that they can show you for portions of a game. I am a quarterback you need to be very excited about. The problem is doing so consistently. That's the issue. We saw it during the bowl game for Tyler Buckner, right? Where I can take you and I could sit down together, watch that bowl game, and we would have a few throws for Tyler Buckner where we'd look at each other and say, man, it's a really good throw. But then we get to that pick six, and it's like, sheesh, whew, that's not what you want. That's not what you need. So it is interesting. I'm not out on any of them yet, sport, but I am going to be keeping a watchful eye. Star ratings and the camp circuit. Do you feel that fans in general overhype the star ratings and the camp circuit? Yes and no, Anthony. Yes and no. Look, star ratings aren't the end all be all whenever we're talking about college football recruiting, but there is a commonality for a reason, right? Like, it wouldn't be meaningless if we didn't consistently see a blue chip ratio occurring for the teams making the college football playoff and then winning national championships ultimately. At that point, stars do matter, but are stars the end all be all? No. In my opinion, evaluations from your coaching staff are what ultimately matter. And this is what I mean when I say that, right? And I'm going to give Alabama as an example. Alabama has done this consistently. Clemson did this. So Brent Venables, I'm sure he carries it over. Not relegated to just those two institutions, plenty that do it. But Alabama will send out offers, and the offer is to come camp. You come camp on campus, you play against other players, and then you go from there. So the Tide coaching staff, the rankings, however they're assigned by whatever recruiting site you prefer, doesn't matter to them. They have their own board based off of what they've seen. Now, it just so happens that, a lot of the 5 stars that are tabbed as 5 stars, those guys are coveted pretty much well all across the nation, right? So, like, yeah, those guys probably have it. But one thing I consistently say, there are a lot of 4-star guys that can play at a 5-star level. Make no mistake. Make no mistake. It's this right here. We don't put it in a box and say there are only 30 to 32 people that can play at a 5-star level every year. We just do that because they try and mirror the NFL draft, right? Get it about 32 5-stars, mirror that NFL draft. But if it wasn't for that, I mean, we got to think about the numbers of kids playing high school football. What is there? 75 guys that could reasonably, like, really put, you get my point, right? We could have all these different types of classifications. So stars matter, but they're not the end all be all. And I know there are plenty of people that say stars don't matter that probably know a lot more about college football than I, and I'd be interested in having a conversation with them. I'd call it a debate. Maybe I'd lose. That's fine. But I don't think we can say with good conscience that they don't matter whenever there's this overwhelming pattern, because then I'd be asked to ignore the reality of what we've seen. That's tough for me to do. That's very tough for me to do. But it's also tough for me to say, oh, star rankings is the end all be all. Look at Josh Jacobs. How many 3-star kids can we talk about right now that are just ballers? You know what I mean? So it's not the end all be all, but it is an interesting litmus test. Portal taking over recruiting. Geek, it is unbelievable what the portal has done. And one thing we talked about on the SEC Connect, which I'll quickly talk about right here, because I think this is an intriguing talking point people aren't really hitting on just yet. And I'm interested in hearing from all of you. The transfer portal and NIL right now is going to change the way coaches do their hiring. What I mean is this right here. Let's talk Alabama, for example. They were in a situation where they got out of the season. There was this overwhelming thought that Bill O'Brien wouldn't be there. It lasted a while, right? And then he went on to the NFL. And then Bama had their time trying to find an offensive coordinator. They reached out to Lebby to see if Lebby wanted to interview. Lebby wanted to stay at Oklahoma. Understandable. They reached out to Ryan Grubb, see if Ryan Grubb wanted to interview. He ends up staying at Washington. They had a list of guys they wanted to interview, right? Nick Saban was going to go through the process, interview all suitable candidates, make the decision after that. They end up hiring Tommy Rees. Now, the reason why I bring this up, Geek, in relation to your point, Tommy Rees and Notre Dame had just done something quite interesting month and a half prior. They'd taken Sam Hartman out of the portal for Notre Dame. Well, we fast forward. Lo and behold, here we are. Alabama ends up taking a quarterback out of the transfer portal, Tyler Buckner. Now, would Alabama have landed Hartman if that search would have been expeditious? I don't know. That's not my contention. My contention is I think this is a point we need to talk about because the transfer portal completely changes the way you structure your rosters. These windows are there. Is it going to change the way teams have to hire and fire assistant coaches? I think this is something we are going to have to watch. And I just use Alabama because it's such a great example. And as you can see, I have the Roll Tide stuff, but I'm an Alabama fan. So it's one that I can speak on and say, I don't know that they would land Hartman. That's not my contention. I just don't know if moves are made the exact same way. And as we talked about on the SEC Connect, Fanatic Perspective, guys, if y'all aren't subscribed to Fanatic Perspective, be sure to go do so. Steven does a great job. Nino, they do a great job. Chris Griffin, Horns Down Podcast, Jay, Unfair Sports, all do a great job. Be sure to go subscribe to all of their content. But Steven had a great point. He said, well, Ty, if you do that, one of the guys might transfer out. One of the guys in Ty Simpson or Jalen Milroe might transfer out. Maybe. Maybe they do. But at the same time, you're in the same status quo you're in right now. Like Nick Saban and them had that same risk whenever they bring Tyler Buckner in when they do. They're running the risk of someone transferring out. Now, nobody did. But to me, if you're going to run that risk, what's it matter if you run it day dot or at the end? At least day dot, you have a wider selection of names available to you. So interested in hearing from y'all. I think this is a topic we're going to talk about more, especially when we get the panel back. We get some of the other guys back. We're going to really dive into this because I'm really interested on how that's going to continue affecting high school recruiting, how it's going to affect the transfer portal, how all of these things intertwine. So very interested in hearing from y'all there. Given the name, I see Harrington, McCullough at the field same time. Yeah, it's going to be interesting, John. No doubt about it. And the thing is there's a way feasibly where it happens, right? McCullough, you move to linebacker, Harrington at Cheetah. We talk all the time about the day McCullough had at Cheetah for the Oklahoma spring game, and he did. Harrington had a day as well. Harrington was good. Right now, Jay, I don't know that they'd want that matchup right now just because USC has Caleb. And Caleb is a little bit of a checkmate right now, not just for Oklahoma, but for several teams. Like you have got to be very assured of what you're doing in your defensive scheme to feel comfortable whenever you have a wizard like Caleb on the other side, not to speak of the wide receiver talent they have. Now, in 3 years, that's a different question. We have to look at the state of the programs, right? I think offensively, Oklahoma would be just fine. But we also have to understand Caleb is that guy. He is. He's got the ability to move out the pocket. Lincoln is a great offensive mind. He is. That defense needs to come together. That's a truth. We can all agree on that. If Trojan was in here, he'd say it. But that I don't know that that's a great matchup right now. For my Hurricanes. Yes, fan base. Yeah, look, you in a perfect world, Anthony, you'd love a 5-star quarterback, but at the same time, man, Mac Jones wasn't a 5-star quarterback. You know what I mean? Like there are only so many 5-star quarterbacks every year. So, yeah, I mean, it depends on the quarterback. It depends on the class. I think it's no secret. Nico Iamaleava was a guy that I really liked coming out of high school. But that doesn't mean that there's not a 4-star quarterback that is just a baller, right? Dylan Lonergan, for instance, he goes to Bama. This kid is an elite baseball player as well. He's an elite athlete. Like that kid's a baller. It doesn't diminish his ability at all. Can't wait for him to push that room. Kenneth Murray, 3-star. Yep. Mike says, I'm still high on Deshaun McCullough. That dude is a man-child. Yeah, he is. No doubt about that. I think the schools that might get the most affected are Anthony, if you could resend this one. I'm a little bit sleep deprived right now. And what's for the most? And okay, gotcha. Big cities like Yeah, I don't disagree. NIL is interesting because as long as you're still developing, you're going to be okay in this game, but you have to be able to develop. Now, the teams that can provide the NIL and develop, whew, that's where it gets very interesting. Pooh, as always, I love the profile picture every single time. Texas is looking mighty strong from top to bottom. I'm tired of looking good on paper, though. Pooh, we are going to talk about that this evening. Here in a little bit. This isn't going to be a super long stream, but we're going to talk about that. Oh, you would get spanked. Unlucky that. See, Nick, I agree and disagree with you here. I look, not about. I think it's a bad matchup just because I think USC is ready right now. Whenever we talk about what USC does well, and especially whenever we talk about the new era of offensive football, I mean they kind of have a checkmate, right? In Caleb Williams, and especially with the familiarity there. But where I think we need to revisit this conversation, Nick, is that they got lucky not playing against Georgia next season. Make no mistake, I wouldn't pick OU to beat Georgia, but I do feel like that would be a good thing for the Oklahoma Sooners. For the same reason that I think it's great that Alabama plays Texas week 2. Bama replaces a lot. You get a real hard look at who you are. A real hard look at who you are. Right? Everything's out the window. You're not going up against your own guys anymore. You got someone who's really come to your environment that feels some type of way. You get a hard look at who you are. So, would Oklahoma have won the game? No, Georgia is so stacked. So stacked. Right? I mean, that defense, they've got 5 stars on 5 stars, and that offense, Brock Bowers is a cheat code. And it's not just him. That's the worst part. It's not just him. That's the worst part. But I think for Oklahoma, it would be a great thing for them to play Georgia because now when we look at it, Oklahoma, they don't have much in terms of a vaunted schedule. So where is Oklahoma going to be? Right? Like if they played Georgia early on in the season, yes, it might not go their way, but they have a very real look at who they are. And I'm not saying you don't get that absent of Georgia. I just think that it would be a really great learning experience for everybody involved. Everybody involved. That's just my opinion on it. It's one of the reasons why I am so excited for Bama to play Texas and vice versa for Texas to play Bama. Nick, Texas fan, man, think about it like this, my guy. You guys get a real hard look week 2. Are we that team? Pooh, you said you're ready to. You get a look week 2. Where are we? Where are we? Or where are they? That's awesome. That is, it's great for Texas fans. It's great for Bama fans, and more importantly, it's great for college football fans. So I agree with you, Nick, but I do wish Oklahoma still played Georgia. I think it would be a net positive for the Oklahoma Sooners. Great experience. Losses are unique because the people who succeed in life learn the most from losses. So a loss isn't ever pointless. And I'm not saying you can instantly go back to the drawing board and fix your loss. College football isn't like that. There are some times where you can learn, but you might not be able to fix the loss, but you learned. And information is invaluable. Invaluable. So yeah, I really wish. Do you think Taylor Tatum might go to OU? That kid is insane. I think he has an. Hey, OU is recruiting really well right now in terms of building relationships with these prospects. Right? They have done very well at that. And so I don't count them out of any battle right now. Uh, they're just really interesting how Oklahoma is posturing themselves in these battles. Matt, thank you for joining us. Yeah, faith, that doesn't matter. If you went to it doesn't matter if you went to college or not, my guy. Everybody has a different path in life. There's no right or wrong answer to any of this. That's all great. Everybody has their own path. It's all about what you do on that way. Matt says, I think Taylor Tatum goes to OU. Yeah, that's like I said, man, they've positioned themselves really well. We're gonna get through a few more get through a few more comments, and then we're gonna talk about this offensive line addition for the Oklahoma Sooners and then move on. Anthony says, Ty, if my Hurricanes end up being one of the teams down the road after Texas and Oklahoma that the SEC adds, I would rather be in the same pod or division as Bama. Look, I'm interested to see what the SEC does. I want the SEC to add in Miami. I want the SEC to get Clemson, Miami, and Florida State, and any way they can do that, because I think it'd be great for the SEC. Right? I think that would be amazing for the SEC. One, I'd like all the Florida schools in the SEC. I think it benefits everybody. I think it benefits everybody. I think it'd benefit your Hurricanes. I think it'd benefit the Seminoles. I think it'd benefit the Gators in a roundabout way. I think it'd benefit every SEC team. You get more legitimacy in terms of your recruiting in one of the most fruitful states in the nation. I'd love that. Bill O'Brien is going, oh, good God. The toughest game OU has is Texas. OU plays 6 teams. Yeah, like I said, man, that's why I want them to play Georgia. That's why I wish they were playing Georgia. And chicken, yeah, like from all the Oklahoma fans I've seen as well, Nick, I haven't really met any Oklahoma fans. Like they'll tell you this right here from the Oklahoma fans I've known and I've talked to about this. They say, I'm happy we're not playing Georgia in terms of what that means for the win-loss category, but I'd really like to play Georgia. And I think that's a beyond fair take. Chicken, by the way, thank you for the $5. He says, all seriousness, I wish we could play Georgia to set our fans straight where we're at, but where we need to go. Completely good, man. It's completely good. I completely agree. I completely agree with that. I think it's good for Oklahoma. I think it's good for college football. You're learning what your landscape is going to be like. Not saying that you're going to play Georgia every year, or not saying that you have a Georgia every single week, but you might play Georgia. Who knows? And you get a real hard look at who you are. I really wish that game was going on. When you get a chance, read my comment about James Williams. I'm wondering if you watched a lot of tape of him, and I know you're not. So James Williams, that's that 6'5" safety. Benefit or defensive end. Isn't that the kid I'm thinking of? Anthony? Is that who? He's like a 6'5" safety. Has got a lot of intriguing addition. Man, I don't even know what you do with him. Because if I'm not mistaken, he's got the athleticism to play in space, and at that point, you might benefit from using him at inside linebacker. But let me know if that's the same. If we're thinking about the same guy, let me know if that. But before or while we're waiting for that, we're going to go ahead and talk. Yeah, that's him. Yeah, so if that's him, Anthony, the linebacker would be hard because of the athletic ability he possesses. Putting him at end, if I'm not mistaken, he was a little bit wiry in his frame, has the ability to add weight, but does he have the ability to add weight to an end position? 65. Yeah, he has the length. There's no question there. If he has the ability to add, I don't know, man. I think linebacker is interesting, but I'd have to really go into a deep dive on his film because I think having a 6'5" linebacker that understands how to cover, because he was a defensive back in high school. I'm not saying that sets you up for immediate success, but it gives you an understanding of what to expect. We look at the modern era of college football. Linebackers are covering tight ends. If you can get him good at the linebacker position, keep that sideline to sideline speed, you want to talk about someone you could put out on a tight end. There's a 6'5" guy on your tight end. That's awesome. It's one of the same reasons, Anthony, I was so interested, and I'm still so excited to see Eric Gentry for USC, transferred from Arizona State. First and foremost, I have a little bit of a soft spot for all the players who transferred out of Arizona State. I've talked about this time and time again. It's one of the reasons I was excited for Jaden Daniels. I think so, but it was going to happen. Mario's linebacker. Yeah. Look, I mean, I think linebacker is interesting. I think linebacker is interesting if you can put the weight on him, if he wants to play the position, right? Whatever he wants to do. But he is a very talented player. The upside is great. Let's talk about this addition for Oklahoma. Mike says the offensive line addition, I'm fired up. Jay said on Unfair Sports he could play center or guard, and this is exactly where we're going to start. Guys, Oklahoma gets a big-time addition out the transfer portal. We talk about Connor Neer. That's a great addition. I love that one. But this one right here is one that, in my opinion, is a little bit more pressing on what I want to give some attention to. Troy Everett, a lot of eligibility in front of him, and he has experience. Guys, one of the things I talk about all of the time ad nauseum until I'm blue in the face. The transfer portal allows you to get certain things that you just don't have the ability to get out of recruiting in traditional means. You can get experience and you can get eligibility. Now you can get eligibility out of a kid from high school. That comes with that comes with the territory. We don't have to say that. You don't get that benefit of both. And for Oklahoma, you get a guy that the Athletic pegged as an All-American, freshman All-American, played good football for App State, played in some good games for App State, played against Texas A&M and they're upset. So this is a guy that played good football, played 10 out of 12 games, if I'm not mistaken, only allowed 1 sack on the interior. And Matt or Mike, to your point, you say Jay from Unfair Sports, friend of the show, says he could play center or guard. That to me is what makes this so interesting. One thing we know about Bill Bedenbaugh is he likes the versatility in his offensive linemen. And one thing I've ping-ponged back and forth in between, and I think this is a great time for us to kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Because whenever we started this stream, I said I wanted to talk about some of my questions for the Oklahoma Sooners going into 2023. Offensive, I have 2. These aren't new. If you've been around the channel, you've heard me talk about them and understand this as well. When I say I have a question about your team, it's probably a lot different and a lot less inflammatory than when you hear the national headline, so-and-so questions. I'm a curious person by nature in terms of like trying to figure out information. I enjoy theory crafting. And so because of that, I spend way too much time obsessing over all the small details for way too many football teams. Right? My biggest questions for Oklahoma offensively come in 2. First and foremost, the wide receiver position. We're going to talk about an addition that I think would be a great help to the Oklahoma wide receiver room. And we're going to talk about why I have that as a question. But second is the center position. And this is what is hard for me. Because while I have a legitimate question about the center position for the Oklahoma Sooners, I have no question about Bill Bedenbaugh. None. There's a few offensive line coaches in the nation, in fact. I mean, you roll them out on that football field, you feel really good about your opportunity to roll out there with an offensive line that you have faith in. Now, the reason I have a question at center, I know that they lost some pieces on the outside. I think the pieces are there. There's been a bit of a battle at center for a while now. The problem for me, it's not settled. That to me is what has me almost questioning the Oklahoma center position. And center is a very important position on your offensive line. Now, I'm not saying you have to go get Creed Humphrey. I'm not saying Andrew Rame has to be Creed Humphrey. You don't. Humphrey is a dude. He is a beast. You don't have to be Creed Humphrey. But you have got to be an Oklahoma offensive lineman. And that's what I'm watching for the center position. So whenever you go out there and you get a guy such as Troy Everett, who played some big-time football. Like I said, he played against Texas A&M. He can come in there and instantly be depth. Here's the other thing I like about this a lot. At worst, let's say this guy is depth. Let's say he comes in and it takes a while to learn what Bill Bedenbaugh wants him to do. And that could happen. We saw in that Oklahoma spring game, specifically looking at like a Jackson Arnold, he struggled with the second team offense. Now, it's not because I think Jackson Arnold struggled. It's because the second team offensive line was really shuffled around because you had some injuries on the first team offensive line. The reason why I bring that up is because at the very worst, you get a guy that comes in and has experience so that even if he's second team offensive lineman, now you feel like, okay, when I look at my offensive line, I have my starting 5, I have a 6th, 7th, and possibly an 8th. I feel good about. I don't think it's realistic that you're going to have a first-team offensive line and a second-team offensive line that you would bet the house on every single year. I just don't. I think every person ever in college football wants to. I just don't. So the center position is where I'm really watching for the Oklahoma Sooner. Nick says offensive line is probably their biggest concern. They lost 2 top 100 prospect on that offensive line and another one with a lot of experience. Look, I don't disagree. I I think we do have to give Bill Bedenbaugh the benefit of the doubt. They're part of it. I even think some of the positions that they're going to replace are interesting, but I do still have questions about the offensive line. I do still have questions about the offensive line. Mine revolve more though at center. That's where I'm really going to be watching closely. Got a message here. Okay, we're good. So yeah, the center is my biggest question for the Oklahoma Sooners, and that's why I thought this addition was so good. He has experience, he has eligibility. Worst comes to worst, and we've only talked about him playing center. We started this off by saying he's got the versatility to play guard or center. So look, don't put him in a box. Don't allow me right now to put him in a box. He could slide over play guard. But well, Mike, if y'all have been around the channel, I don't badmouth players or organizations. That's not what I do. The reason that's not what I do is because I wanted to get into this industry, getting away from the industry I was in that was filled with, I mean, you can try and get a positive outcome in law, and especially like personal injury law firms. You can try and get a positive outcome. That's some grim stuff, man. And so all the time I talk about the glass half full. What I mean is I'm not going to sunshine pump you. I'm going to give you my honest opinion. But if something happens, I'm not going to sit there and stew over the negative. I'm going to say, okay, this is what happened. This is what you can look forward to moving forward. The reason why I say that, I don't want to say, badmouth any player, saying somebody can't do something or question. Oh, no, Mike. No. I agree with you. My point here is, Mike, that I've been saying that as well. Chris Griffin and I have been saying that. Yeah, we've been saying that on this podcast as well. My soliloquy right there was not to say like, oh, I think you're talking about me. No, my soliloquy is to say I usually try and tell you what a player can do. But that's been a talking point we've talked about, is that I think Rame is smart. I think Rame, when he gets it together, it's there, but it's the inconsistencies. I completely agree with you, Mike. That's my fault. I probably framed that bad, got distracted over here, but no, we're in a complete 100% agreement here. No doubt about that. No doubt about that. That's my fault, Mike. No. We're in agreement. I usually try and give you the outlook of this is what happened, but this is what you can do moving forward. And I think there's a reason they went out and got Troy Everett. Sometimes the coaches, they don't have to say much. I think this is one of those times. I'll put it like this. Another time I had this exact same take, Mike. Ironically, it was with Alabama. Whenever Pete Golding moved from the defensive coordinator at Alabama to the defensive coordinator at Ole Miss. And I just, look, I like Pete. I had a friend play for Pete Golding when he was at UTSA, and my friend really speaks highly of him. So I have no issue with Pete Golding. In fact, you listen to my friend talk about him, he's a really big fan. Loves the guy. Loved his time playing for him at UTSA. How many times do we see a coordinator leave Bama for a total lateral move? And I'm being very, very generous by calling it a lateral move. You go from one of the top 10 teams in the nation on a year in, year out basis for the same job at a good team. I like Ole Miss. The quiet part was said out loud, right? Kind of the same right here. I don't think right now Oklahoma has 2 tackles that are going to get drafted in the top 3 rounds, but they're offensive. Yeah, Nick, that's what I mean, right? It's one of those things where it's just like, I agree with you. They lost some guys along the offensive line that they have to replace, but there are some offensive line coaches around the nation where if you give me those guys, I feel pretty good. Kyle Flood. I love Kyle Flood. A big Kyle Flood fan. I've never hid that fact. Nick, you can give. I've never hid that fact from y'all. Ever. Sharon Moore, Michigan. You get that guy in the room, I'm probably inclined to think he's going to put something out there that's pretty good. Bill Bedenbaugh. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. But that's not at all, Nick, to diminish from your point, because I do completely agree with you. Ty, do you have your preseason rankings for the top 10 for I don't yet, Anthony. I don't. I'm still going back and rewatching like scheme and team as opposed to individual. I usually start the individual stuff actually this month. That's when I'll really start going back and watching individual players. So yeah, this is when it gets fun. This is when it gets really fun. But there was a comment earlier I wanted to highlight. Chicken, thank you for the $2. You saying we want Arch, we want Arch. Y'all are fine. You have your 5-star quarterback. Leave Arch alone. I can't find the comment, but someone earlier came in here and talked about two. Oh, here we go. Pure, I'm sorry I couldn't find your comment, but I know it came from you. I know it came from you. You said Keon Coleman or Jordan Tyson would be a great addition to the wide receiver room. I completely agree. I completely agree with you there. And Jordan Tyson is the name I would watch out for. One thing we need to understand about Jordan Tyson is this. He's from the state of Texas. More specifically, he's from the Metroplex. You guys have a wide receiver coach in Emmett Jones that, I mean, goodness gracious. You want to talk about connections to the Metroplex. He's connected. He's real connected. So I think that works well in your favor. I think the other thing is the type of wide receiver he is. Y'all have a need for it. Look, you've gotten Andrell Anthony out the transfer portal. I like his upside. What's up, bud? I like Anthony's upside. You've gotten some guys like a Nick Anderson, a Jaden Gibson. I think they're raw. I like their upside. But for Jeff Lebby's offense and for the Oklahoma Sooners moving forward, that wide receiver room, I think they could still use some help. Love the Brennan Thompson addition. He can move the chains. Unfortunately, every name I'm bringing up, we fall back on this common theme, a lack of experience. And that's what scares me. Now, let's get one thing straight. I'm not saying that experience is king and that experience is necessary. That's not my contention. Plenty of wide receivers haven't played a down of college football before and came in and then had phenomenal careers. That's dime a dozen. I'm just pointing out the fact that you lose a lot in terms of receptions. If I'm not mistaken, whenever we broke this down, 5 of the top 7 pass catchers are no longer on roster for the Oklahoma Sooners. That's a significant number. Something like 64, 65% of receptions and 60-ish% of yards are gone off that roster. That's significant. We were talking 30%, 40%. Hey, I might be able to argue something. That's a significant amount. That being said, I have not hid how highly I think of Jaleel Farouk. Guys, sometimes the way your team uses a player, it says it all. It says how much your offensive staff thinks of that guy. Just look at the way they use Farouk. I think they think a lot of Jaleel Farouk. And it's so much fun to watch. Right, I have the same argument. Nick, if you're in here, any of the Texas guys, I talk about this all the time. Steve Sarkisian with Bijan. We can go back even further. Steve Sarkisian with a Devontae Smith. That guy was a weapon when he didn't have the ball. And Oklahoma did a lot of that same stuff with Farouk, right? Where they would use him as eye candy. Let's get him moving. Let's get the play flowing. We're going to go in one direction. First down quick, second down quick, third down quick. We're going to convert on that next first down. We're going to use that orbit motion, have him fake back. Linebackers, safeties, they're all going to go forward, and we're going to hit the wheel route. We saw that. We saw that several times from Oklahoma. If I'm not mistaken, in the Florida State game, they actually hit almost that exact same play for a touchdown on that wheel route. Little switch. They'd done something to that side every time. Bop, 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 bop. Went the other way, had the defense kind of all discombobulated, hit him with the wheel. That's the type of stuff that Lebby does. It is. It's fun. It's the type of stuff that I mean, goodness gracious, when we look at Steve Sarkisian and how he would use Bijan, I saw so many times where they would put Bijan out as a decoy and a safety would step forward and Quinn or whatever the quarterback was would just almost look and you could see them smiling. from the camera because they're like, got him. That's just the way it is. And look, it's certainly not relegated to those offensive minds I'm talking about. I'm just talking about some of the more prolific ones, and Levy, obviously, because he's there. So make no mistake, I really like the talent in the wide receiver room, but Jordan Tyson is interesting. We talk about him being from the state of Texas. You get Emmett Jones, coached at Texas Tech, great ties to the state of Texas in terms of recruiting, but also Jordan Tyson has big playability written all over him. The Colorado Buffaloes last year were not a good team. They're not. They weren't. There's a reason why whenever there's a mass exodus and people are like, "Oh my god, that's awful for Coach Prime." They were 1-11. I hate to be that guy, but they were 1-11. So, to be quite honest, a complete roster overhaul was necessary. That being said, there are certain guys that have slipped through the cracks that I'm like, "Man, kind of surprised that guy's going." Tyson is one of them. Maybe the one for me. We talked about Lamonius Craig, very talented, very talented. You want to know the difference to me? Tyson has eligibility and a lot of it. True freshman. Played some for Colorado, got hurt, but when we look at what he did those last 3 games, he torched Oregon. Torched them. In the last 3 games, he put up over 300, and I think it was like 50 something yards. Let me look. I have the numbers right here. Let me go back. Let me find it. Find the sections. He put up something like 350. It was just wild, right? Tyson had his best game against Oregon's. Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. I'm trying to find where I have these numbers, but I might have written them down on a piece of paper actually when I made that video, and that's tragic. They're not in my laptop. Point being, he went over something like 345 yards, is I think what it was, 3 touchdowns, 13 receptions. And when we look at his body of work at the end of the year, he averaged 21.4 yards per attempt or per reception. I'm sorry. 20 yards per reception. That's insane. That's what Oklahoma needs. That's what they need. Because, guys, as much as I love Jaleel Farouk, and I have been very honest at how much I like Jaleel Farouk was used as a chess piece when you had Willis, when you had Mims, when you had Weiss, when you had Eric Gray. I don't question the running back room. I think you got a lot of guys there. I think it'll be by committee. I don't know that you have an Eric Gray that'll just like solo it this year, but you got some talented pieces there. There's no denying that. That's solidified. Love the running backs, but you don't have those guys that. Not only was Farouk able to help, they were able to help Farouk. And so when I look at this, that's one of the biggest reasons I said this. Right now, opposing defenses, they know they have to key in on Farouk. How are you going to open this up for Farouk? Because Farouk's going to open it up for everyone else, but this is a double-edged sword now. This is a double-edged sword. I think Jordan Tyson is a great addition. I think Keon Coleman would be a great addition. But Jordan Tyson, because he's from Texas, because he's from the Metroplex, because of his eligibility, he stands 6'3". We talk about what Levy likes with the bigger body wide receivers. We go back to Ole Miss. That was his preference. If they can get Jordan Tyson, love that addition. Love that addition. Let's hit some comments, and then we're going to talk about the last little thing for this evening. Hall of Fame media, welcome in, man. Welcome in. He says there's a lot of them talent in that room, but yes, it's unproven. Yeah, no doubt about it. Drake Stoops. No doubt, Gun, no doubt. The problem is, though, is Drake Stoops is your slot wide receiver. He's going to benefit from being able to take advantage of the defense, looking at a Farouk, looking at everyone else. But if the defense is keyed in on Farouk, they're like, okay, well, we don't have to worry about anyone else opening it up for him. Now they know where Drake Stoops is. So I don't disagree. Drake Stoops reminds me a lot of Slade Bolden a few years ago for Alabama. And Slade caught a lot of flack from people. And I was always saying, like, man, you need a third down? That guy's automatic. You need yards? He's automatic. He might not be the most explosive wide receiver you have. I'm not saying he's your wide receiver 1, but he's a smart football player. He's a smart football player. And that is something. That is something. A smart football player. Don't sleep on Stog, no doubt about it, Jimmy. And I've said this before. Out of all of the additions Oklahoma has had out the transfer portal, that Stogner addition offensively, that's a great one. Really like that. Since you cover college football in general throughout college football, have you heard good things about Jason recruiting? You know what, Anthony? I haven't been super tapped in to Miami recruiting, but I will say this. I'm going to reach out to some people on the Miami front. Last year, before the season started, I hooked up with Dirty Bird, who's on Sirius XM out there. He came on the podcast. We had a lot of fun. He's a good dude. I'm going to reach back out to him. We'll talk about it. But what we do know is that there are a lot of heavyweight recruiters on that Miami staff. A lot of them. Mario Cristobal can recruit his tail off. My biggest question for Miami is a lot less about recruiting and a lot more about being able to take advantage of what you currently have and being able to build on something. Because for Miami, to me, it's not about coming to the table and saying, we need to win 10 games this year. Every team in the nation that struggled would like to follow up the next year with a 10-game winning season. That's every team. Did you get better? That's the question. Did you get better? And not naturally, if you won 10 games, of course you got better. That would answer that question. But you don't have to win 10 games. I just need to see Miami as building. That's what I need to see from Miami. Nick says, I think Guyton is good, but first round tackle, not yet, especially as a freshman. Yeah, Nick, look, I'm not going to give anybody that accolade. And in fairness, as I say that, I finished reading your statement. You gave it to Kelvin Banks, and I don't disagree with you. So ironically, right as I was about to say, I don't give that accolade to anybody. I don't disagree with you. Guys, I don't care if you root. I don't care who you root for. Kelvin Banks faced 4 edges. Nick, correct me if I'm wrong. 4 edges that went in the first round. Didn't allow a sack on any of them as a freshman. Yeah. Yeah, he's good. He's very good. Very good. You're going to see a lot of stuff in the passing game from Gavin Sawchuk. It's going to remind you of Rodney Anderson when you see it. You know, it's funny. We were talking about that, Pure. I'm really excited for Sawchuk. Very excited. I think there is a definite role in this offense for him, and I think he's going to take advantage of it. And look who we have. Well, Dapper coming in 51 minutes into the solo stream. What's up, man?
I'm sorry. Dang, were you on here for 50 minutes?
Solo dolo, just going.
Well, I don't want to get on here if you only gonna be on here for another 20 minutes, man. You know.
I mean, I'm on my last few topics, but ride it out with me. Ride it out with me. It's okay. We're talking about Oklahoma transferring. The transfer portal editions y'all got today. And just kind of keying you up because I want to hear your take on this, right? My take is this right here. The Connor Neer one, love it, because when I'm talking about Oklahoma in 2023, and we've had this conversation in the green room, but I have 3 questions for the Sooners in 2023. Offensively, wide receiver. I think there's talent, but there's not experience, right? And we're going to talk about that. Center, you and I have been on that, man. And I was talking to Mike. If you're still in here, man, shout out to you. Yeah, here we go, Mike. Chris and I, we've been talking about the center position for, oh, good God, now. What is this, a year and a half?
Yeah. Yeah, about a year and a half. Well, yeah, about a year and a half. About a year and a half.
Yeah. And my third question is the defense. And I don't say that, and you know me at this point. I said this earlier in the stream. I don't say that the same way the national media will say, oh, we question so-and-so's ability to win. No, when I question something, it's more of a genuine, like, scientific theory. Like, I'm interested. I'm interested in Oklahoma's defense because you're who your head coach is and because of how the defensive state was left whenever he inherited it. Naturally, that's the talking point. So when I see Connor Neer, let's start there on the transfer portal acquisitions. What were you thinking about that? Big time player for his institution. I mean, goodness gracious.
Well, not only for his institution, but the thing about him is that, you know, it's a lot of high major offers that came out, came for him as far as not just in the transfer portal, but as far as when he came out of high school. Like, he was a guy that was on a lot of people's radars or whatnot. And then for whatever reason, you know, App State, but it's a great pickup for us. I know when initially his name was brought up, I know a lot of people talked about the center position, but from what talking to my uncle, looking at some things that I've read or whatnot, is he could play all three positions inside. He's a guy that is,
Yes.
could possibly be a true beating bow guy that could, play all over the offensive line, especially in the interior. So, like I told you, it's a big pickup because you hear good things, and then also some of the competition that they face. Let's just be real, even though Texas A&M is Texas A&M, they still, quote unquote, as my uncle would say, they get the best defensive lineman that money.
Oh yeah, if there's one battle we can give a team their flowers for against Texas, if you're an offensive lineman that handled your own against those boys, we can talk about it. We can talk about it. Yeah, let me get to these donations real quick because Daniel says, thanks for the 5. He says, happy Friday. Just wanted to show some love. Absolutely, Daniel. Thank you for being in here, man. Always thank you. Chicken, $5. Thank you so much. He says, Chris throws some horns down. That's what that came from just now. Hall of Fame Media, Jason says that you're looking clean as the Board of Health. Not the Board of Health where I'm coming from, because let me tell you what. And Jimmy, this is interesting because depending on where you look, you get a different answer. I'm pretty sure from Colorado, he's listed at 6'3". Per ESPN, he's listed at 6'2", and his high school profile lists him at 6 foot. We're talking about Jordan Tyson.
No, yeah, I got you.
But no, I love the offensive line addition because of what you said. He has versatility. He's played A&M, and didn't they play? It was another big game that he played.
North Carolina, right? Did you say that?
I think so. I think it was
North Carolina. They should have won that game because North Carolina won on like a walk-off, Hail Mary pretty much. But yeah, no, I mean he played against some he played really well. I think App State as a whole played really well when they played against those P5 teams. But I mean they've been a program, especially last year. They had a lot of momentum in certain games or whatnot. But I've always liked that program, especially when they came on the rise against Michigan that year. So I mean they've been on everybody's radar, not a team that you can sleep on. When you look at them on your schedule, you think of like a Army, Navy, Air Force type of matchup where, hey, look, we can't overlook these guys because these guys will go out there and they'll kick our ass.
Like a Kent State.
Yeah.
You put Kent State on that record. Some people will laugh, they'll scoff, oh, you're playing Kent State. The college football fans will know, look, we should win that game. We should handle it, but you cannot sleep into that game. App State's a lot the same way. I like that point a lot. Now, let's talk about the wide receiver room for a bit.
Okay.
Right? Because this is an area where PG disagrees with me a little bit. I think even Jay disagrees with me a little bit. And that's, I understand. And Shadow, I agree with you here, man. I am big on Farouk. Every time I rewatch y'all's season, Chris, I become a bigger fan of Jaleel Farouk.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not joking, man. It's so much fun watching how he's utilized. But you know this. How many times did I talk with you when Sark was leaving Bama and I was like, God, the offense he was calling, like the orchestrating, like you give me those pre-snap motion eye candy plays and a player that can really do so effectively, I'm sold. Jaleel Farouk is there. What are you thinking about the transfer portal additions you could take at wide receiver? And then what are you thinking about the room as a whole?
Okay, so first let me piggyback because I want my credit as well, because coming into the season I said, hey, look, Dontario Drummond. That's exactly how that's a guy that Levy used an awful lot all over the field and while he was at Ole Miss. But coming over here, Jaleel Farouk is a guy that I see being able to be molded into that role as well. And you saw that a lot last year, especially with him lining up at running back in the slot, on the outside. You saw him in a lot of different being used in a lot of different ways. It just wasn't Gavin Freeman or Drake Stoops. Guys like that running those jet sweeps here and there. You would see Jaleel Farouk be used in that way as well. So huge fan of Jaleel Farouk. I think right now, before they take a real snap, I think Jaleel Farouk is your one. Oh, yeah. I think that Anthony has a chance to be that. You're hopeful that that Petaway can step in and that Gibson can get his hands right, kind of just get his whole mental right, be prepared for the season, and then Nick Anderson, you're hoping that he's just healthy. Okay, you hear a lot about him, hear rave reviews about him, but it's just a thing about being healthy for him.
Best
Um,
ability is availability.
yeah, yeah, exactly. As far as the wide receiver room, man, I'll be honest with you. I'm confident in the wide receiver room. I'm not overall just excited about um our wide receiver room, but I like it where it's at because they have something to prove. A lot of
Gotcha.
people are going to be looking all over this team for holes, and I think that's probably the only hole that you could possibly say. When you hear other scouts, I mean, from other teams, these other coaches, that's one thing that they're quick to point out is that they don't feel that OU has a guy in the wide receiver room that we have to game plan for. So for me, it's just about how do we step into that mold. But I think you saw, but to kind of answer your other question directly, I think that what they've done in the transfer portal thus far, with adding a guy like Brendan Thompson, Andrew Anthony, guys like that, I think they've addressed some of the woes that you've had. They've gotten burners. When Petaway gets in here, he's going to be another burner. You have consistent guys. You have your glue guys, or quote unquote your possession guys. Drake Stoops, Gavin Freeman, guys like that who can step into that mold. Now, what you're wanting to see is a JJ Hester get healthy, and LV Bunkley Shelton be able to step up and actually be a part of it as well. But the biggest thing that people have to understand about this wide receiver room is just not the wide receiver room. If Caden Helms can get healthy, that's going to be something that could possibly be an X factor. But you have Stogner, and we all know that a healthy Austin Stogner is a damn good thing to have on your team, especially when he's motivated and he's an active participant in the offense. Let's just leave it at that, because you know what I'm talking about from his time at OU, and then honestly, kind of going to South Carolina. I know he with the injury bug a little bit up there too, but at the same time, when you have an active Austin Stogner, it's really good.
Yeah, I want to hit these comments. LFG says, in my opinion, Oklahoma is set for a big year in 23 despite many flaws still on defense. I think they're going to improve. I don't think there's any question about that. I know you live in high dollar Prosper, just outside of Prosper. I don't live in hot Prosper. I live in Denton. No OU inside out. I just get to talk to people about OU all the time, man. So that's the fun part about that. As a Yankee outsider, very familiar with your metro area. Are you from New York, man? That's where all my family's from. I love New York. I love New York so much. Every time I go there, I just feel the innate rage everybody else feels in New York City. It takes me over, and I just feel so at home. All of a sudden, I have a reason to be angry, and I'm like, yeah, this is good. This is good. This is good.
But I
Go
was
ahead.
just going to say, yeah. No, look, I think that I don't necessarily know if we have just an elite superstar on this roster, but we have guys with that potential right now at the wide receiver position. I think Jalil Farouk has a chance to be special, especially going into his junior year. I think this is going to be great for him. I think that Andrew Anthony, I think that he's motivated. He wants to prove some of the naysayers wrong. You heard good things about him at Michigan, but it was just putting it all together and being consistent,
Yeah.
So I think that you have a bunch of guys that are hungry to be able to go out there and show that. I think here's the thing for me, like I told you, Ty, it's not necessarily the receivers. I think for me, what it's going to be about is, can Gabriel make the plays that he needs to make? Meaning, is he overthrowing Bunkley in the in the end zone? Is he
that's
missing
got to
on
be
guys like
converted.
Stogner, stuff like that? Are we still missing those passes and overthrowing guys or whatnot? Or are we being able to actually be on the same page? I think that that's what will help our wide receivers out a lot. But then again, like I said, another thing that we've talked about time and time again on your show, everybody's show, to be honest with you, is the fact that you're going to be able to rely on your run game this year. I think the offensive line is going to be even better, and I definitely think that with Barnes, Sawchuk, and then obviously if Marcus Majors is still in the fold and he's healthy, or if you can rely on the Caleb Hicks, a Hollywood Smothers. Well, obviously, a lot of people keep talking about Tyree Walker, but you have a really, really good running back room. And so a lot of people want to say, oh, yeah, we don't have this at the wide receiver. I'm like, people, look, It wasn't like we had guys just making plays all over the field outside of Marvin Mims last year and against Florida State in the bowl game, and you ran the ball more than you you passed in that game. It was just the fact that it came down to a couple of bad possessions defensively and probably some timeouts we shouldn't have used. That's what kind of lost us the game down the stretch. It was just a couple of bad possessions, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't know that I think y'all's offensive line will be better
Uh-huh.
just because you're replacing some pieces. Now, that being said, I really like Guyton.
Yeah.
Actually, I told you this before. Whenever I made that video about him transferring there, he
Mm-hmm.
actually hopped in my comment section, and we had a little bit of a back and forth. And really good dude. I think he's going to be good. But I do completely agree with this. Because there's some new on your offensive line, I think y'all are going to get real run heavy at times, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that benefits you. I do. Because we saw what it means. Now, one thing I am curious about. I'm curious about this. John Bryant says we have 3 running backs that are better than Gray was. I want to know who those 3 are.
I would say Sawchuck. I would say Sawchuck jumps off. I'm sorry, everybody keeps texting me, but I would say Sawchuck for sure jumps off the scales. I think he has obviously he's more speed. I think that even though it was just one game, it was against Florida State, who a lot of people are looking at as kind of the Cinderella team this year, as you know, they're going to finally get that other glass slipper and finally make their appearance, you know, in the college football playoffs again. However, you know, like I said, look, I think Gavin Sawchuk, I think Bournes has a chance. I think what Bournes last year was you know, showing that he can run through the tackles, all the rest of that stuff. But I think this year, you know, I want to see him take that next step and be elite as well, be able to make guys miss and go ahead and get up and down the field. You saw flashes of it, but I mean, he was a freshman last year. But like I said, Gavin Sawchuk and Bournes, Javonte Bournes, I think those are 2 guys that you're going to have to deal with early and often in the in the season. As far as that third guy, I don't think that third guy has emerged. My uncle, we talk about all the time. He says Smothers is the guy for him. I think Smothers is probably going to redshirt like Sawchuk did, add weight, get healthy, get acclimated to just, you know, this level of football, which I'm not saying that he has to. Hell, he's a 2-time player of the year in North Carolina, if I'm correct. And the guy is electric. But I still think that, you know, I think there's a certain progression they want him to go through. I think Caleb Hicks could be a guy, but I'm not sure if you have a third back on this team right now who is better than Eric Gray.
Look, this is where I agree. I like Barnes. I like Barnes a lot. I like Sawchuk a lot. Eric Gray accounted for almost 1,600 yards of offense for y'all. That's not insignificant. That is a good chunk of y'all's offense. And I had this argument with people the year before and going into last year, whenever people were saying Eric Gray is not going to be running back 1. And I was like, if you know Jeff Lebby, if you know what he wants, Eric Gray is going to be your running back 1. I had this debate with everybody, him or Marcus Major. I said, I like Major. I like him. You know Jeff Lebby's offense. You know what Eric Gray is going to do. Now, that being said, Sawchuk, Barnes, they all fit the Lebby scheme. That's not my point here. My only point is this. While you have a lot of running backs I love, I'm not going to say anybody is just better than a guy who gave you almost 1,600 yards before they give you 1,000 yards.
Yeah.
All right. That's just, I don't know, man. But y'all also have to remember, I'm a big Eric Gray fan. I have always been a big Eric Gray supporter. So I will admit my bias right out in front there. I have always been a big Eric Gray guy. Let me hit this. SBC says, I'm in late, so I'm starting this over from the start. Just wanted to say thanks. Gray just couldn't fill the shoes of the last 6 to 10 backs before him. Maybe, but I also think there was a lot of things that couldn't fill the shoes of what the 6 to 10 backs before him had, right? I just think it was a bad time for Oklahoma. And you had a running back who was able to shoulder a lot of burden for this offense. Oh, I mean, a huge part of this offense.
No, I mean, look, just think about it. Eric Gray year 1 and Eric Gray year 2. Eric Gray year 1 doesn't get drafted, probably.
Probably not. No, I agree with you there. But I was perplexed at how he was used year 1. You remember I told you all the time, I'm like, this doesn't add up to me. You have a guy that in technicality fits what Riley wants to do, is dangerous out the backfield, and they're running him behind the center as if he's Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
That never added up to me, but God, man. Now this is I think a conversation I'm willing to have, that the upside is there. I'm willing to give you that. I'm willing to give you that. But y'all got to remember, man, I am a little bit biased when it comes to Eric Gray.
My only thing about Eric Gray was that, I think year one, a lot of the stuff that he did year two was just like, oh, okay, it's working this year, because you're thinking to yourself, man, he's just dancing way too much back there, or when he steps out. But it was like his running style and Levy's scheme was like the perfect marriage.
Yeah.
Because as soon as he got that one-on-one, those quick twitchy moves, those jukes and all the rest of that stuff, it worked for him because he was able to plant and he mixed a lot of guys. So it was just one of those things where I just think that it worked out last year. And then obviously by default, you had to do a lot more. You had to get creative. You had injuries, to your quarterback, injuries, along the offensive line, Majors goes down or whatnot. And so, you saw, I think Levy probably didn't want to run Wildcat, but he had to a whole bunch last year. I'm not even going to mention the Texas game, but that was something that came into the fold as well. And Eric Gray was able to actually execute it. Him and Brayden Willis. Yeah.
So, and I've said this before, one of the things that I've always been kind of perplexed by, and you and I have had this conversation, Eric Gray, and I think it's because he was a transfer, right? It's not like he was recruited by Oklahoma from the jump and committed there. Out of all the players on Oklahoma's roster, whenever, Lincoln made the move from Oklahoma to USC, a lot of players got the benefit of the doubt for how the season went, because there was there was some distraction. I always felt like one guy didn't get that benefit of the doubt that everybody else got, and it was Eric Gray. And I don't know, man. And I don't know that I disagree with this either, Jimmy. I think Sawchuk and Barnes, they're going to be so good. They're going to be so good, so good. But I really think Eric Gray was a dude for the Sooners, an absolute dude. Gray was a big piece. Yeah, man. His ability to do what Levy wanted, to be a threat in the passing game, even though he didn't get as active in that aspect as I thought he would, just the fact that he could do it. Gray is a Jalen Hurts after Baker. And you know what? I don't hate that, SBC. I actually don't hate that. Thank you for the $1.99 as well, man. I really appreciate that. But I actually don't hate that comparison in the least. I actually kind of like what you did there. I really do. Because you're giving credence to Eric Gray being a beast. Jalen Hurts is a beast, but was he a DeMarco? Was he? No. But he's still good. I actually love that. Now, Chris, I'm actually very glad you came in for this, because this is the last thing I wanted to get to today. Urban Meyer had some interesting comments about the Texas Longhorns, right? Comments that I don't necessarily know that I disagree with. And he was saying, whenever you look across college football, the Texas Longhorns, roster for roster, are up there with the most talented teams in the nation. And I know, right as we start this, I'm going to get messages. They always were. I don't disagree, but but I look at this, Chris, and I thought of this example today, and I thought this is one you'd really appreciate, because I think it really hits the nail on the head. Texas's recruiting formally is very akin to how Lincoln Riley recruited for Oklahoma. Oh, y'all are going to get some dudes. That's not the question. They're all going to be on the offensive side of the ball. And on the defensive side, it's just going to be an afterthought, right? Mm-hmm. That same sort of logic, I feel like, was applied to pre-Sark recruiting at Texas, where it was just like, oh, we just want to get a bunch of stars, but forget how they add into the team. Oh, we have 3 offensive linemen going into next year. Let's get 4 more 5-star wide receivers. That'll help. And it's just like, no, it won't. It will not help. They're not doing that anymore. That's one of the reasons why I'm high on Sark. We've had this conversation. Urban, though, his comments stood out to me, man. And I think it's, one, because Bama, Texas play each other week 2, but 2, this is a big year for Steve Sarkisian and the Texas Longhorns.
Yeah.
If we look at this and remove all bias, the Texas Longhorns offensive line is one of the best in the nation. It's one of the best in the nation. Kyle Flood is a great coach. It's real talented. Kelvin Banks is, I mean, that guy's a first rounder tomorrow, right? He repeats the season he had this year. He's probably a top 10 pick. He's going to be great. The wide receivers, there's talent. If Quinn is healthy, I'm interested. I'm really interested because the talent is there. We saw when everything is clicking for Quinn, we saw what it is. But does it come together this year? I don't know, man. What was your thoughts for Urban? I'm sorry, I have chickens on me. He says, Ty, stop. Do not compare them to my Sooners. No, I hear you. I'm only painting the picture of it's very similar, right? It'd be just like a fan telling you, chicken, oh, well, y'all didn't win anything with Lincoln Riley and y'all had good recruiting classes. Yeah, but they're not as good as the Brent Venables recruiting classes, right? Like not only in terms of rankings, but in terms of cohesion. It's just Brent is recruiting differently, not saying one is objectively right or wrong, but for where Oklahoma is, Brent's is the correct way.
Yeah.
I feel the same about Texas. So thoughts on that?
All right, I'm gonna take my OU cap off, okay? I'm gonna just say this right here. Look, I don't believe it's going to come together all the way. I still think that defensively it's going to be interesting this year. I know that Texas fans are going to eat me up about this, but what is life like without Gary Patterson again? You know, as much as you want to say that it was PK, it was this, PK, that, Gary Patterson had a lot to do with that. He changed a little bit of what was going on. So I'm not saying that's not to take away from PK, but at the same time, you know, look, everybody thinks that Hill is going to be that guy. He's a 5-star, you know, that guy. He was a guy coming out of high school. And I'm not saying that
guy.
But at the same time, it's kind of the same conversation we're having with a Gavin Sawchuk, Javonte Barnes with Eric Gray for you. Overshown was great last year.
Oh yeah, if they still had Overshown and Anthony Hill, I would be real interested.
Big shoes to fill.
Yeah, no doubt there. No doubt.
And so, you know, I still look at that defense and say, okay, you know, what's the edge looking like? What are we doing on those things? Okay, because it's a lot of questions that we have, same questions that they have. Offensively, look, they're going to go out there. They're going to be. They should be a juggernaut. They should score 40 every game. You know, Quinn is definitely a capable quarterback. The only maturation thing that I want to see from him is honestly, you know, decision making. Is he still going to be, you know, loose with the ball, staring guys down and still throwing it into double and triple coverage, you know, for some of these interceptions, or is he going to be that guy that can go out there and get the job done and elevate the team? I don't care how bad Alabama, everybody's trying to make them out to be with this whole quarterback situation. It's still Bama, and you're still going to Alabama. There's not a lot.
I don't disagree there. Yeah,
there's not a lot of teams outside of like LSU that can say they went into Tuscaloosa and just beat the dog crap out of Alabama. But look, seriously, you know, I hear you about the offensive line, but I'm wanting to see what is life like without Bijan. You know,
I think that's fair.
You can put you can put a Brooks, you can put a Baxter, put guys out there like that. That's great, but do you have a running back that could get hit in the backfield 2 or 3 times and still take it 60 yards? You know, these are real questions that I have for them. What's life like without Bijan? What's life like without having that type of weapon in that backfield with Quinn? You know, I know they're high on Brooks and all the rest of that stuff. I just don't see it. I'm not saying that they shouldn't make the Big 12 championship game, but if we're going to talk about just high aspirations or whatnot for like a playoff or whatnot, I still think that they're a year or two away, just like some other teams. So, yeah.
Well, see, I think this is their year. And look, this is where I agree with you. And we've had this conversation. Losing Bijan, that's a hit. Yeah. And as much as Texas fans want to say,
and Roshan.
Yeah. And Roshan Bull, I think you have a great comment. That's why I highlighted it. Losing Rojo feels more important than losing Bijan. I don't know who's more important, but I do know losing them both. That's big. as much as Texas fans want to say, oh, that's nothing, that is something. Here's where I do agree with the Texas fans, though, like Nick, frightening shadow, whenever they say, but look at our offensive line. And I'm like, yeah, I hear you there. You got an offensive line that graded better in the pass than the run last year. I think that'll change this year. I think that's going to come up. But I think that's an area when I look at it where I'm like, okay, I can excuse like not having Bijan. But I am interested in life after Bijan because I've told you this before. There are certain guys you have to know when they have the football. And then there's Bijan. You got to know whenever he steps on the football field. He and Jahmyr Gibbs, man, they had a play almost mirror images of each other. And Jahmyr Gibbs just happened to come against Utah State early in the year. They motion Gibbs across the formation. He goes into the flat, and Bryce just does a little shoulder fake. I mean, everybody on God's green earth stepped forward. And then Bryce just hits the receiver right in between the corner that stepped forward and the safety for a big first down. Quinn did that same thing several times with Bijan. Send him out there, little shoulder check. I mean, he is a dude. Yeah. I am interested. I do agree with you there that I am interested to see the life after Bijan.
Another thing is, look, I'm just going to say this. Texas has a really weird schedule this year. They have a good schedule, just like we do, to be honest with you. They have a path to the Big 12 championship game and more if they go out there and execute and do what they need to do. I'm not going to deny them that fact. I think for me is that when you look at their schedule, obviously, I think there's like a bunch of games or like a month or a month and a half where they don't even leave the state of Texas, right? But I guess for me, I'm just wondering, are we going to see the Texas Tech and TCU type of games this year?
That's fair.
And look, same with OU. We tripped ourselves up and lost some games that we should have won last year, hands down. West Virginia, Baylor. It was a bunch of games that we lost. We for some odd reason we could not. It wasn't enough recognition on and off the field to kind of figure out, okay, this is what we need to do. And, I've said it before and I'll say it again. The same way Texas Tech beat Texas, the same way they beat us. And so, you're kind of looking at that and saying, are we going to beat ourselves? Texas fans should feel good about this year. I mean, going through it. But the thing that I would say is still remember, you're a 5-17 that went to being, 7-5, 8-4 last year, or 8-5. That's what you finished last year. So it's definitely an improvement, a 3-game improvement. But now we're talking about going into let's go win the conference now. So I see that the talent has elevated. I see that Sark is building this team. And look, I'm happy with the pieces that you guys have accumulated through the transfer portal and also the recruiting classes. But I think the thing is that I'm still kind of tempering expectations simply because. But I'm not saying it. I mean, at worst, to be real with you, at worst, this team should probably finish 9-3, 10-2.
Well, that's the thing, right? I know Oklahoma fans aren't going to want to hear this. And Blood, you say OU will win the Big 12 title on their way out. Maybe. Never say never. Football is a little bit like fighting. Right? Yeah. I love boxing and UFC. I've talked about this so much. But, we can bet on a fight. At the end of the day, if Ben Askren goes to dive and Jorge Masvidal knees the life out of him within 10 seconds, I don't care how much the analytics say go with the wrestler. It's a fight. Right? How many people bet that Miami was going to beat MTSU? And meanwhile, they got dog walked by a 4-letter acronym team. So you play the game. No doubt about it. I'm not saying you can't win the Big 12.
Mm-hmm.
I like a lot of the OU coaches. I haven't hid that fact. I'm high on OU's future. I haven't hid that fact. I also haven't hid the fact that I've been high on Texas's future with Sark. And Bryce, you had a comment earlier, and I did want to talk about it a little bit because your comment is fair. Your comment is fair, but I also think my response is equally fair, and I'm interested in hearing your take. Bryce says, don't just look at UT's history, look at Sark's history. Sark has never been able to put it together as a head coach, and I don't disagree.
Mm-hmm.
My thing is he got a demon off of his back. And I do think that's big.
Well, I was going to say he looks like he's learned from his mistakes.
He got a big demon off of his back.
And I'm not even talking about that. I'm just talking about just strictly football. Here's what I have to say, Ty.
Adjustments need to come, though. They've got to adjust.
Ty, I am still, like I told you, and I'll say this now, I'll say this on here, I'll say it to Nick, I'll say it to Steven, I'll say it to whoever the hell, whatever Texas fan you guys want me to say it to. Show me so I can become a believer.
That's
Build
fair.
consistency as well. Don't just, I mean, because the thing is that we're talking about this past decade, they've been relevant because of recruiting classes and just the fact that it's Texas. They're always going to be relevant because they're a brand. But as far as winning in this past decade or whatnot, there have been several years throughout this 10, 11 year span that we've heard, yeah, this is the team. This is the team, or this is the team. Got close. Obviously, we beat you guys. We split that year, but I'm just in a show me state. Like, you got to show me, I don't care. They're going to talk, Texas fans, oh, well, you guys, I know you guys miss Lincoln and all the rest of the stuff. Regardless of who's the coach, we've won. And that's something that we've done an awful lot around here, regardless of who the coach was. And my thing is that it's still going to happen for us. But for you guys, yeah, I think that you guys are going to win this coming year. I like what Sark is doing. I was there. I saw the massacre. I saw the 49-0 massacre in person. And I was like, it's like Sark wasn't even really game planning for anything because he knew that we were just really on our last leg, to be honest with you, coming into that game without our quarterback and all the rest of that. But my thing is, I'm just in a show me state, Ty. You got to show me. And it's just like, it's like with Oklahoma State for me. And I'm not trying to compare the two, but I will say this. You can't go out there and beat OU one out of once every 6 years and then claim that it's a rivalry or that this is a real thing that we have going on. Like, you gotta put together 2 or 3 years in a row for me just to show me. And I'm not gonna down somebody for winning one championship, but I'm just saying, like, it just hasn't happened since 2009, I believe.
I don't disagree, but where do we draw the line?
Ty, they've arguably had some more talented teams than this.
Do you think? I don't
if
know.
If you want to go off of star-wise and all the rest of that stuff.
Yeah, but I don't, because I think that's where we always get
mixed up. I know, but I'm just saying,
every coach that
they've had has brought in a damn good class.
But I mean, Chris, that's just like saying that because Lincoln had all those 5 stars, it was better than what Brent did. That's not true, though. Right? Like, we can look at the actual cohesiveness in the class and see the point that I made a while ago.
Yeah.
Lincoln's classes were great. I said this to you when Lincoln was there. When y'all were saying, oh, we're going to come for Bama. I was like, with what? 15 people in your recruiting class? Come on with it. Come on. I welcome it. Bring it. Come on with it with your 15. That's not what Brent's doing, which is why I'm like, with Brent, I'm like, no. Guys, this is different. This is a cohesive recruiting class. This is good stuff here. This is stuff that everybody should be talking about, much like Texas. The shift. You're not wrong, man. You're not. They have always recruited talent, but is it meaningful? Is it empty calories, or is this a sustaining meal? This is a sustaining meal.
This is the best Texas has looked in quite some time. But like I said, there's still questions. All the questions that they have for us is the same questions I have for them now.
But Chicken, I could argue the exact same thing for Texas. Their recruiting made no sense. Like, it just made no sense in terms of like totality, right? So I don't disagree with some of the points that are being made, but I do think that there is a difference, and we have to acknowledge this difference. But I agree, Chicken, and I think the same can be said for Sark. I mean, you look at the way they recruited, or the way they didn't recruit the offensive line relative to how Kyle Flood came in there and recruited the offensive line. That's notable, man. That is big time stuff. Big time stuff. Bryce, okay, here we go. I can agree he looks better, but even some of the games Sark lost to Texas have been lost because of bad coaching in the second half when teams. Bryce, this is the argument to me, my brother. This is the argument to me. If you ever get into an argument on social media, and this is from a former debater, use this one instead of the 7-win Sark. And I'm not saying don't use 7-win Sark, because it is a real point, but we also need to acknowledge that he got a real demon off of his back. And Robert, I know you said as a man who is in charge of molding young men for the future, why should he have any demons at all? Then why should anybody be a coach? Let he without sin cast the first stone. BV is very spiritual now. Hey, That's a quote from the good book. That's a dangerous, slippery slope to start because he had his demons aired out. Do we want to start airing out everyone's demons? I don't think so. I don't think anybody would like that. So I don't disagree with this, Robert, because I think that implies that you have to be perfect, and we as humans are imperfect by nature. Yeah. Chicken, you developed, used the draft to argue the point with Texas. Yes, you developed. That's great. But you still didn't do complimentary football. So what is it good for? Like Chicken, I'm a little bit confused about your argumentation here because it doesn't make any sense. You developed. You still didn't take comprehensive recruiting classes. You still took recruiting classes that had 15 people. That's why Brent Venables is better. Now Texas is developing. Now, I mean, you look, there are going to be several guys from this team that are going to play NFL football. Several. So I hear you, but I just don't think that's a solid argument. You did develop. You did not recruit cohesively to football. It's why when Oklahoma got to the playoffs, they should have won games that they didn't because they didn't have a complete team.
Yeah.
That's the same thing with Texas. So yes, you developed. You didn't have a complete team. Developing, that's big. That is big. And you guys did do it. But in the end, when we're talking about winning football games and winning national championships, that recipe wasn't going to be conducive to success. Right? Like that's I think where we disagree, Chicken. I agree you developed, but was it conducive to winning the big game? No, Sooner, that's my point. OU wasn't a complete team with Lincoln Riley. They weren't. And so if I'm going to give that credence to Lincoln Riley, if I'm going to give that to Oklahoma when talking about, well, why didn't Oklahoma have postseason success? It's a very real answer to say Oklahoma did not have like complete football teams. It's the same answer could be said for Texas. Let's talk about Kansas State. Hey, RJ, I got so much flack for saying that the winner of the Big 12 would have 3 losses. Granted, I did not think TCU would do what they did. But, I still predicted 3 losses.
Let's talk about K-State. No.
Check your Twitter, by the way, RJ. I sent you a message on Twitter.
Hold on one second.
K-State, K-State, man, they're a good team.
K-State's a solid team, but like I said, man, Texas beat them, and then OU were a couple of plays away from actually turning that game on its head, but we couldn't make a pass that night. K-State has had our numbers for the last couple of years, and I'll be honest about that, but I'm not going to say that team is somebody that I'm going to be talking about coming into to the preseason Big 12 polls. They're going to be right there in the same position. I still don't think that Will Howard necessarily moves the needle. They caught fire last year, but I still don't think he moves the needle. And I want to see what life is like without Deuce Vaughn as well.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I think Florida State. Didn't they get the Florida State running back? They got a transfer at running back from somewhere, and I want to say it's Florida State. And I think that's going to be a good. Yeah, they did. They got a Florida State running back to transfer to K-State.
Chicken, I hear you. My argument is who has won more conference titles? Texas has a few NFL recruits. I agree they were not complete. Besides college football or natties, what's the SEC or Bama's record against OU? My brother in Christ, we play to win the game. You play to win the national championship. So this isn't going to be a winning point by my metrics of argumentation, right? Like you're right. 50 years ago, and even in the 2014 game where they all played, I mean, Oklahoma had a great game. Beat Alabama. That's awesome. That's a real win. I'm not going to take anything away from that. But if your argumentation is, hey, let's go back 100 years and start looking from there, and then be like, oh, well, that matters more than national championships? Nah, I know moral victories. I know national championships are king. Now, not saying those wins don't mean anything. That's awesome. you want to have a winning record. If Oklahoma says we have a winning record against Alabama, that's big. But to say, oh, well, because we have a winning record against Bama, would you rather have the winning record against Bama or the 7 national championships that they've put up?
I want 8. I need I need one more. That's all I care about. And no more words of
you see what
Bryant.
I'm saying? Like, so
No,
at that point,
look, Chicken,
you play to win the game.
But my biggest thing is like Kobe said, hey, if it's championship or a bust season, be honest with you, championship or bust every year. I mean, I think that's the expectation that we have.
Yeah, no, look, I think it's no secret at this point that I have a lot of love and respect for Oklahoma. I think y'all are a blue blood program. I think y'all are one of the best college football programs in the nation. If you're asking me, would I rather have the bragging point of, oh, well, we have the head-to-head or the national championship success? I think everybody's going to take the national championship success.
Yeah.
No, but Chicken, that's why I've always agreed with this. You hold your own in your conference. Y'all are a great team, and that's why I think Texas and Oklahoma coming to the SEC is great for the SEC. It's why I disagree with a lot of SEC fans that think that Texas and Oklahoma are going to come in here and be food. I don't think that's the case. I think Texas and Oklahoma come in here, and they're going to be great additions to the SEC that make the conference better, just like Missouri and A&M did. They made the other teams there better.
I've been trying to say that for the longest. I think it's something that, I mean, I don't know.
No, there's no question that whenever Missouri and A&M got to the SEC, it accelerated their willingness to change the style of ball they played. It brought them into the modern era. That was good for the SEC. It's Chicken. Make no mistake here, my brother. We agree here. OU is a historic team. My only point here is I'm not going to be moved by an argument that says I would rather be the team that beat Florida State 8 times and they beat us 3 times. But we have less national championships. I want the national championships because then you get bragging rights over anything. I want them natties. Corey, Saban has beaten OU. They've split it. 1-1. 1-1. The Bob Stoops win with Trevor Knight.
Boy, that was one of the most amazing.
That was a wild game, man. Awesome game. Awesome college football game. And then when Alabama beat Oklahoma, whenever Oklahoma had Kyler Murray. Awesome game as well. Unbelievable game. But no, I don't disagree, Chicken. I just, at the end of the day, the most compelling argument Chicken, thanks for the 20. He says, you're wrong. We will get our defense better, but if it was a week notice, no SEC teams beat us. Wait, you mean right now on a week's notice, you don't think Georgia beat y'all? You don't want my answer on that, Chicken. Man, I love OU.
I wanted that game so bad.
But in a week's notice, I don't know that I agree with you there. I do agree with your defense will get better. Your whole team will get better. I think Oklahoma is trending up. I think Oklahoma is a welcome addition to the SEC. I am very excited. But I don't know that you want Georgia on a week notice. Because that's a double-edged sword, my brother in Christ. That's a shadow LSU as well. Bama, I mean, and look, I'm not saying Oklahoma's an easy out. That's not my point here. I'm just saying that none of those teams are an easy out either. That's my point. But I do agree with you, Chicken. Thank you for the 20. I do think that the defense is going to get better. And you're still not getting a running back. Because we need the running backs. And y'all have enough good running backs. That's not happening. Man, I think the last comments I'll say about the Urban Meyer to Texas stuff, man, I don't disagree. Yeah, Texas is very talented.
Texas, yeah, go ahead.
Very talented. Now, Bryce, I was going to tell you earlier, I think your argument that you should use going forward instead of the Sark past, and like I said, don't eliminate that argument, but understand that people do evolve, and he had a very real demon, and I have a lot of respect for anybody that publicly goes through what he went through and can try and come out on the other side. Right?
I think, yeah. No, I was just gonna say I agree. I agree with what he said. But I mean, it's been said for the longest. Show me something different. Like I've been saying that for the last 2 or 3 years. Show me something different. Go out there and actually win a Big 12 championship. Show me that
That's
y'all
fair.
are really here. That's all I got to say. If not, if y'all go out there and have 8-4, 9-3 season, same old, same old.
That's completely fair. Bryce, what I was going to say, the point to use in your argumentation that is legitimate, I am a Sark fan. I'm a Texas staff. This Texas staff, I'm a fan of this staff. I like a lot of the pieces on this staff.
Hey.
But let me say this to him because I'm going to get derailed and forget. Your point about the lack of adjustments, Bryce, that's the argument. That is the argument, Bryce. That is the knock against Steve Sarkisian right now that I find the most damning. And if you want to argue what worries me, it's that. That's it. The lack of adjustments. That's it.
So what I was going to say before we get up out of here, we've been out here for an hour and 39 minutes, y'all. Go ahead and like, subscribe, and share the content here because this is the value creator that we have here. But for the last topic, I thought that we could talk a little bit of Auburn news.
Oh, I loaded this up earlier, man. I actually led the show off with the Auburn news.
Let me go ahead and put that up. So
that's disrespectful, but continue.
So, you want to get real disrespectful? What years were those? Yeah, okay.
How many is that? God, that's such a small number.
So, anyways, I was just gonna say Peyton Thorne, man. I just noticed that. Does that move the needle for you? We need to have that. Ty, on your
I'm gonna do merch with that.
Oh yeah, we need to do that. We need to do a move the needle section on your show.
Actually, bro, that's a great idea. Actually, I think once the season gets here, we're gonna have. I don't know when, but when I just start doing that'd be fun. Gabriel, we're gonna do this one as well. Best uniforms, one show. That's gonna be fun.
That's a move the needle topic.
That's a move the needle topic.
But yeah, go ahead. Does
it
move the needle?
Here's what it is for me, man. Peyton Thorne has the experience. He's coming off of 3 years playing good college football. I thought the offense for Michigan State was atrocious. And I don't put that all on Peyton Thorne. I think it was very telling whenever you heard a lot of people saying that you were seeing Peyton Thorne transfer and then you were seeing the wide receivers transfer because they wanted to get away from each other. Well, Keon Coleman is reportedly visiting Auburn. So he couldn't have disliked Peyton Thorne that much, right? I think that offensive system for Michigan State left a lot to be desired. Here's my biggest question, Chris.
Have you, before we get to your question, have you heard like some of the faint stuff about kind of what they're wanting to do up there
at Michigan State?
Maybe get Mel Tucker out. I mean, have you heard a little bit of that?
Man, I have no idea what's going on with Michigan State right now. And that's why whenever Michigan State was y'all's biggest competition, I'll put it like this. If whenever David Stone goes to commit, I think he's going to go Oklahoma no matter what. But if Michigan State is y'all's biggest competition, write it. Send it in now. He's going to Oklahoma, right? Michigan State lost their defensive line coach, who I really like. He's now at Georgia Tech. That's tough. But here's the thing, man. And I'm interested in hearing your take on this, actually. I'm still looking at Robbie Ashford for that quarterback job.
Oh, go ahead.
And I'm going to tell you why. It's his mobility. Yeah. And when I look at Hugh Freeze and what Hugh Freeze wants to do, man, I think that mobility, because here's my other question, Chris. Do they have the weapons enough to have the quarterback stand there and distribute the football to be a pocket passer? Or would it be more conducive to everybody to have a mobile guy? I lean more towards the mobile guy. What's your thoughts there?
Can you go to LFG's last comment? That's my thought. That's my thought, to be quite frank with you. I think that he's a good college quarterback. He's a common college quarterback. I thought that he had a good year at Michigan State, but he's not a guy that moves the needle. Let's just be honest with you. There you go.
Yeah, I still look at Robbie Ashford in
Yeah,
that battle.
I think it's Robbie Ashford. I think Peyton Thorne throws his name in the hat. I think it's strong name. I think it's really between those two, in my opinion. But I think if Robbie Ashford can show some type of consistency, I think this is a guy that pushes Robbie Ashford over to over the edge to get that job or whatnot, to be starting quarterback. Like I said, I'm not saying that Thorne is a terrible quarterback, but I'm sorry. I just, from last year, something wasn't right with Michigan State. I think he's a true pocket passer. He's a guy that is going to try to make plays with his arm. I don't think he can make plays with his legs. Not saying that he couldn't, but he hasn't shown me in the 2 years that I've watched him that he's a willing rusher, that he's
Not
a
like
willing
Ashford.
runner. Yeah, not like Ashford. You know, I always say this, but Joel Klatt he described Baker Mayfield versus Oklahoma State, the game that Hollywood broke out. He called him. He said, "I'm not gonna say he's a fast guy, but he's a willing runner. He's
I
a
love
guy
that.
that's willing to get out there in the open field, try to make a play or two with his legs as well as his arm." I don't see Peyton Thorne being that type of guy. I don't think that they have the perimeter talent to go out there and say, yes, we're going to stay in here with this guy. Because if you think about the offense that you saw Peyton Thorne run, I mean, I'm not going to say he didn't take deep shots. I don't know what his numbers look like as far as his deep throws, but
So look,
go ahead.
it was serviceable.
Yeah,
Right? It
and
was
that's what I'm
serviceable.
trying to. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say, Ty. Whenever I watched him, he's throwing slants, drag routes, different things like that. Those are the type of plays that he's able to hit. He's connecting with his wide receivers on, and guys like well, not Andrew Anthony, but guys that he had up there, they were taking those home, and they were getting big gains and stuff. He pushed the field down. He pushed the ball down the field, but in my opinion, same thing with Ty Simpson versus Ty Buckner and Jaden Milroe. You have a guy that has potential with his legs to be able to
That's
to
fair.
propel him to that spot, to give you a chance to be able to keep plays alive or whatnot, opposed to having just, not saying that they're not good, but just some, pocket passers. So you got a guy that's coming in, and Peyton Thorne, I'm just not confident in that move.
So here's what I look at, man. He's coming off of back-to-back years where he's over 60% completion percentage. And to me, that's a must, right? Like if we're talking about a quarterback, we're going to bring in and he might be a starter. I'm not someone who wants to, you're looking at Nick's comment, aren't you?
Yeah.
I saw it in your face. Yeah. Look at that. We've podcasted enough at this point. I know you. Yeah. I know you. That's great. So he went from 60.4 to 62.5. That's fine, right? If you're above 60%, we can have this conversation. Here's what stood out to me, Chris. And once again, I've always said, don't get wrapped up in the numbers, watch the film. But the film backs up the numbers. And that's when you can get wrapped up in the numbers, is when you look at it and you're like, nope, that's exactly what I expected. When I looked at the numbers, that's exactly what I expected. His average yards per completion was 6.9, down from 8.3 the year before. He went 242 completions out of 387 attempts for 2,679 yards. That's what I'm looking at, Chris. Your numbers were almost identical from the year before. The year before, he went 235 for 389. So only 2 less attempts and 7 more completions, but 600 yards less. They weren't pushing the ball. Now, once again, I think that's on the offensive coordinator, but it's part of the reason why I lean on Ashford's mobility. I don't know that presently Auburn has the wide receivers that really scare me enough, or the offensive line depth to say, yeah, stand in the pocket and bang. I don't know. I don't like that. I don't know. I want that mobility.
I mean, yeah, I want that mobility, but I also say is that the transfer portal giveth and the transfer portal taketh away. And so the first year it was amazing. The second year, not so much.
Damn it, Sam beat me to it, man.
What?
My hot take was going to be this. Would Casey Thompson have moved the needle more?
He would have been a guy that for me, yeah, he would have been a guy.
I think so.
And then I would have brought in probably a star freshman and we would have rolled it out. Yeah, I think Casey
I agree.
Thompson. I keep forgetting about Casey Thompson being out there. He's a wild card everywhere that he goes.
I agree.
I still
Sam,
can't believe.
I agree.
I figured that because when I saw Sims came out there with the first team, I was like, yeah, they're moving on. I don't. I think that they want Sims at Nebraska.
He might be one to watch.
Yeah. Oh no. The only problem with Sims last year, because Sims and Milrow, I'm gonna be honest with you, Ty. Sims and Milrow were guys that I was looking at, and as far as like if they jump in the portal, I was like, hey, I want some of that. But as far as Sims, I'll just say this right here is one little like stray comment. Sims is great. Accuracy is the issue.
What's up, LFG? What's up, LFG? His mom got a good Twitter account, or what's good? What's good?
He was supposed to be a LFG was supposed to have been on the left. He put up the deuces like 3 minutes ago.
Hey man, we're an exciting bunch. You can't leave this. So what's you said you're in New York City. So for me, LFG, what I always do is I always catch the train. I go see my brother and sister just outside of Richmond, Virginia. And then I hop on the train. I have my sister take me in the morning, get on the train outside Richmond and go straight from there, go to DC, catch the other train, go from DC right to New York City. And then I'm in New York City for as long as I can be. And then I hit the train from there to Albany, because that's where my people are, is just outside of Albany and Saratoga. Not in Saratoga, right outside, like Greenwich. I say Greenwich. You go up there, they call it Greenwich. So yeah, no, I love New York, man. I love New York. That place is awesome. Like I said, I love New York City. It's everyone's so angry, and I love it because I'm angry. I feel at home. What? No, so I think that's about it. Look, I can't think of anything else. Chris, you can think of anything?
I am this Jordan Tyson move. I would say it's just two things that's on my mind. First off, I'm really I'd like to get Jordan Tyson. I think he'd be a great addition to that wide receiver room. I think there's talent there. I'm not gonna say I'm worried or scared. I mean, it kind of is what it is. But messing around out there at Arizona State, that could be that, because Samples them. It's just hard to get away.
Samples is a dude.
Samples and Carrington, linking back up. That's a big move out there.
But if I may interject myself right here, Chris,
Uh-huh.
You're not wrong with Samples, because Samples has that connection to the North Texas area. His father's the coach of Duncanville, still, right? Or did he? Yes. Yeah, I, for some reason I thought he got picked up for a college job, or that maybe I probably saw him retweet his son getting picked up from the college for Arizona State, and that's what I thought. But here's what I will say about Samples in that, because you're right. He's from Allen. Jordan Tyson is from Allen. Look who y'all's wide receiver coach is.
Yeah.
Hey, Samples is connected as anybody in the Metroplex, but so is Emmett Jones.
Yeah.
So that's why I like y'all's chances there. I do.
I do. I mean, I just want to go get, I just want to make as many additions as we possibly can to that wide receiver room to make sure that we're formidable going out there. I want a lot of competition. I think that there's at least 2 or 3 guys that will emerge. I think that, and I'm not talking about Drake Stoops. I think Drake Stoops is going to be Drake Stoops, but I think there's some guys that will possibly emerge. Speaking of Arizona State, because I think every time I think of Arizona State, I think of Malik. That's a fascinating topic. That's going to be a fascinating thing to. I'm not even really worried about Arch Manning necessarily. I'm more interested in what Malik is going to do, because I don't think. Because let's put it like this right here, as high as the hopes that we had for Spencer Rattler transferred from Oklahoma. What if that is the type of year that Quinn Ewers has? Are the Texas fans pushing for Arch, or are they pushing for Malik?
Malik.
I mean, I think so. You would want Malik, but is that or is Texas hiding Arch Manning and putting him in the spring game the way they did for a reason, to kind of temper expectations for him to be able to, keep him at bay.
I think it's more of learning in the fire. Right. And I think the reason they did that is because the Mannings have expressed interest in redshirting. They have said, we do not mind, because that was a big thing. Whenever people were talking about, like, is it Bama? Is it Georgia? Is it Texas? They came out and we were like, we don't mind redshirting. We actually don't mind sitting a year. Got it, chicken. Got it. That's my mistake. Yeah, no, Malik is a dude, man. He is a dude. He's not going anywhere. And I what I was gonna say, I think it wasn't anything like to temper expectations. I think it was more of those things of like, okay, you want to sit a year, you really want to learn. Let's have you learn. You're gonna go up against, our second team defense or our third team defense. You're gonna be on the third team offense or the second team offense. So let's see how you do it. But that being said, man, Malik Murphy, if something happens, knock on wood, God forbid something happens with Quinn, Malik Murphy, I think, is that guy stepping in.
Right, hear you.
No.
Well, guys, last thing that I want to say is this right here, okay? Go that guy, Nick V. All right. This is a family show, so I'm not gonna say what I want to say to you, okay? Hit me up in the DMs and I'll tell you what I think about Coburn. That's all I gotta say, okay?
Oh no.
At Chris with a K on Twitter. Definitely hit me up in the DMs. I'll give you some insightful thoughts about some very vivid descriptions of Coburn.
That's salty. All the flavors out there, and you choose salt. That's tragic.
I'll salt the wounds.
He says, "Love you."
I'm all here for the love.
I will say, man, this is one of the things that makes this fun, right? And especially, I think this show. There's a lot of great YouTube shows out there, but I think it's the fact that we do have, right, so many different fan bases that will come into these live streams, and we've built up this kind of rapport with them to where they check us, we check that, and it's fun, and everybody gets involved. And at this point, man, like, we know a lot of these people in the chat.
Yeah,
we've said their name for a year now. Like, it's built up something awesome, and so that's what makes this a lot of fun. But guys, we're gonna go ahead and get out of here. I've been at this for over an hour. Chris has been at this for just about an hour.
Yeah, it's just about an hour. Yeah.
So I said we only had about 10 minutes left when you came in. That turned out to be a lie. Yeah. I think we're gonna get out of here, man. What you got planned for this weekend? You got any sporting events you watching, or just chilling?
Just chilling, man. Finally chilling. Just got back from home. Had a little baby shower, and then had to give a speech at the high school and stuff. So
we got UFC this weekend.
Oh boy, that's gonna be fun.
We got fights this weekend, so I'm excited about that. I am not giving you a running back, chicken. Y'all have a loaded running back room. Your running back room is phenomenal, and we need the running backs. No, no.
Yeah, Sam.
Lakers. Yeah.
Hey,
yeah.
Lakers in 5.
Ooh, I like it. Well, we'll see. When we get back Monday, we got a lot to talk about. Given that it's the off season, guys, we might venture out into some other avenues, talk about some things in these latter portions of the stream when it's kind of the wind down time. But until then, Chris, let them know where they can find all your great content before we officially get out of here.
Hey, follow me on Twitter at Chris with a K. That's KCHRIS with _K. Horns Down Podcast, YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcast from. Definitely check us out. And yeah,
man, great stuff. Always glad to have you here. Y'all already know, constantly doing college football content. I know, Shadow, I'm counting down the days. It's going to be so. I might be at the game. That's disrespectful. That's just sad. That's just a sad attempt at this point. Until next time, we'll see you on Monday, 5:30. Y'all already know. Till then, see ya. Another spinning wheel.